Dear 580 friends, and at this moment it is Sunday 28th of November, and we are making this update from our home in the Netherlands again. After about 6,000 miles, kilometers driving, we are back home again, and I can tell you it's cold here. But happy to be back, and let's see how the guys are doing. So I got some questions about where can we find the tracker and the tracker link. So if you go to globe580transit.com, you can go to the tracker page and you will find all the things around the race itself. So you find press, you find Twitter, you find SoundCloud, and you find live tracking. So press is obviously for press. You can find photos, etc., etc. Twitter is the live feed from the boat. It's quite cool to look at. So the guys do every 12 hours a tweet, or at least they try to, and sometimes really, really funny. Sometimes you can see that they have a lot of work to get the boats going fast, like now in the big sea. If you look at Etienne, he did 138 nautical miles for the last 24 hours. That's a very good thing. I think we are going to see bigger numbers here. I even dare to say that one of the guys will hit 150 miles, including current. Yet they are doing well. And so that's Twitter. And you can also look at SoundCloud. SoundCloud's cool. You can have here different calls.
Hello.
So that's SoundCloud. Let's go back to the tracker page and go to live tracking. That's what I usually do. So here you have to click OK. There are multiple courses. We're showing the Globe Transit at the moment. Yeah, that's true, because that's the race that's on right now. Okay, cool. So when we hit this picture, we immediately see that the guys are in a field of wind. How much wind? So it's more or less 25 to 30 knots. Remember, it usually is an offset of 10 knots. So if they have 25 knots, medium, you will have 45 knots at the top and 25 knots, 45 knots. So what did I say? 25 knots, 35 knots at top, and 15 knots at the bottom end of the scale. But from what we see is that, and we hear from the boats, is that they have quite a lot of wind. And one of the things you can deduce this from is that they are running only jibs, sometimes not even full jibs, and doing very good speeds. So let's see, we will look at the bigger picture, and what we see now is that the Azores high is actually at a good place, namely the Azores. And when you're early in the year and Passat is doing its first few weeks, you see that there's quite some wind blowing. It's not really stable, but that's cool, but there's quite some wind blowing and the guys are right in the field. So let's zoom in and let's see what happened the last 48 hours. So it's now 28th of November. I will go back to 26th of November, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So you can do it like this. So more or less 4 o'clock. Okay. Molly Claire, Jim in the back section, he's not going too fast, but that's more according to Jim. And I personally hope that he would, from some reason, would go west, because if he had done so 48 hours, he would be roughly here, and he would have actually been in quite a good spot. But remember, the guys don't get the weather we get. So a tracker was here, Origami was there, number 2 and Manoan were quite close, almost match racing. What we heard from the guys is that they can talk on VHF, but what you will see if we hit the slider on the bottom and go 24 hours further, more or less, yeah, then the guys decided to do different things. So let's zoom in a bit more. What did they do? Number 2 decided not to go between the islands. Manoan decided to do. Actually, very typical for the guys. Number 2, the more seasoned, more experienced cruiser, knows that when you go between the islands, you will have a hard time. And actually, when you look at the tweets, you can see that Michal Manoan had a tough 48 hours. He went right between the islands. And let's see where they are now. So, at this moment, Manoan number 2 are running fine. But when we look at the leaderboard, we see that Origami is doing very well. But when we look at the distance to finish, then you see that they're quite close. So it ranges from 19 on 76 miles to 2,300 miles. Yet if we count out Molly Claire, who is a bit far off, we see that the range is from 1976 to 2043. So that's quite close, actually. Let's see what the recent predictions will be for finish. So what we see is that most of the guys will finish in about a few days for Christmas, probably. They're doing good speeds, but I think in the end they will slow up a bit. But that's looking in my glass ball. I don't know if you say this in English, but it's a way of doing predictions. And we're not in predictions. Let's see what will happen the next day and the day after, because we know that the wind at least will be reasonably predictable. So it's now 20th November. Let's see if we put it, sometimes it does this, I don't know why. Let's see if we can go to the 29th of November. Yeah, like this. Okay, so remember, they will do more or less 140 miles from here to the next 24 hours. So if we look at Origami, for instance, and we lengthen his pass more or less with 130 odd miles, he will probably be here. And the same, roughly the same will be for Tracker and for number 2 and for Manoan. And Molly Claire obviously is leading the back of the fleet, although he is alone. If I look at his speed, actually, I think he's on the bare poles. So nothing to be afraid of, just all cool. So in 24 hours, they roughly will be here, 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 and here. So Origami and Manoan will have the best wind. Tracker will be in a sort of middle spot. But it's not only wind, eh? Let's see what the waves are doing. So they have quite some waves. Manawan, he was speaking about a tough 48 hours in his tweets. I can imagine, because when you go between the islands, you have always the breaking of the waves between the acceleration zones. And this will keep you on your toes, because if you want to push a boat, and he does want to push his boat. If you want to push a boat, you will be in the cockpit pushing it, and probably he's happy that he's out of all the acceleration zones. Yet he has a lot of waves. I think he has had the most. He has the steepest waves. I've been there, and when you come from the relative rest between the islands and you hit the full ocean, you see that the wave height is roughly between 6 and 9. So, okay, let's say it's 7.5 meters around this acceleration zone, and here deceleration zone just in front of the island. So that's interesting, to say the least. So the waves are far bigger than the length of his boat. But remember, the tops of the waves will have fairly bit of meters between. So it's high, yes it is. They're steep, yes they are. Yet it's impressive. It's not dangerous at this moment. Number 2 has had a more easy ride. A tracker does a solid 4 to 5 meters, I think. Origami is in a good spot from Wave and Moleculaire, all cool. Actually, when you don't go too fast, the waves are more easy to be ridden from. Yet number 2 was telling about a 24-hour record of 133 miles. Actually, Etienne himself was talking about 138. Depends on when you start counting, of course, and this is the tracker. And the update from the tracker can differ from the moment that the skipper himself tracks 24 hours. And in this case it does. But actually it's quite cool, and I'm fairly confident that when these guys are a week from now, that one of these guys have done 150 miles, including current, because they will have currents. If I push the current from here, you can see that there's an interesting current going. So the current is from 0.4 to 0.8 more or less. So yeah, it's interesting. And in 24 hours, it's almost 20 miles of current if you have 0.8 of current. So that adds up to your total distance, obviously. So back to the wind, because the wind's the most interesting thing for sailboat, especially on this route. I've pushed it 24 hours. Let's push it 48 hours, and we go to the 30th of November around 5 o'clock. It would be looking like this. So where will they be? I will put back in the ruler and put it on origami. The next point I'll put roughly here. So I reckon 250 miles will be a safe bet. Yes, something like here. So yeah, if we go back to this to the picture and look at it in a bit broader perspective, this is roughly what it looks like. So they all will be about 250 miles from the position that they have now, And actually, I think when you look at this picture, Tracker and Peter Kenyon, so Don and Peter Kenyon on origami, will be dealing the best cards. But it's all prediction. Let's see in 48 hours. In 48 hours, my fellow race director Lutz will do a tracker update, and he will do it with a guest. The guest is Guus van den Akker, a friend of the race, sailor and a small boat enthusiast too. So if you made it to here, thanks for listening, and a lot of fun with the tracker update in 48 hours from now.